Thank you so much for joining, Gokul. Uh, really appreciate your time. Always a pleasure. Would love to just hear like a quick background about yourself, and then if there's anything that you think people don't know about you, I would love to know one thing.
Natan, thank you very much for having me here. I'm excited to be part of this podcast and to connect with the audience and with you. I am an investor, board member, and company helper. That's what I think of myself. Till a few months ago, I was an operator also, and that's been my career. I've been an operator at many companies over the last 25 years. It feels crazy saying that over 25 years, but I joined Google about 20 years ago. I was an early employee, actually more than 20, 21 years ago. I was an early employee there. I was lucky to be leading a product called Google AdSense on the product side, which was a large part of Google's non-owned and operated properties and advertising part of that, and then helped Google go public. Started a company after that called Chai Labs that I ran during the global financial crisis. It was an interesting experience entrepreneurially, and then that company was bought by Facebook in 2010. Was lucky enough to run Facebook's ads team on the product side for about 3 years. Helped the company go public by helping figure out what it means to build a mobile ads product. And then subsequently, I served on a management team at both Square and DoorDash separately and helped both companies go public. At Square, I led product design and engineering for the merchant side of Square for a few years, and then led a business called Caviar, which is a food delivery service that was bought by DoorDash. So I ended up joining DoorDash, led Caviar for a couple of years at DoorDash, and then joined the corporate development team and worked on new products and deals. Left DoorDash a couple of months ago, and I'm a full-time investor. I also sit on a few boards, Coinbase, Pinterest, and the trade desk, and I'm a fairly active angel investor, invested in more than 100 companies, actually many hundreds of companies, I would say, over the last 17, 18 years. One thing that people don't know about me is that I play pickleball. I'm a huge tennis fan, and unfortunately, with my knees, as I grown older, my knees can't really take running around on a tennis ball court, so I've started playing pickleball and really have enjoyed it. It's a beautiful sport, and I can see why it's so popular.
I love that. Thank you for answering that. Really appreciate it. I've been playing a little bit of pickleball myself. That's awesome. I also heard you have a dog. Um, my wife is actually a vet, so we love dogs.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dogs are amazing. I'm one of those. They say one of those dads who's now best friends with a dog they didn't want initially. I mean, like for many families, my kids were the ones who wanted the dog, and as you know, of course, after a couple of years, it's the dad who's our parents who are taking care of the dogs.
Yeah,
Kids, kids engage
I
with the
love
dog.
that. I admire the time between the boards and the investors and the amount of time that you put into your companies. It's really special.
That means a lot. Thank you. And I know you care deeply also. We work together on a few companies, and I think it's always great to work with people who care because ultimately these entrepreneurs, especially at the early stage, don't have, they don't have many people around them. And I think that's one of the things I hope to do as an investor, be there for them when they need it.
Okay. So first question, what are you seeing as some of the biggest pains in early stage for the companies you're investing in right now? What's driving that, and what do you think are one to two things they can do creatively to solve or create some action steps here?
Well, the number one thing I'm seeing is people. As you know, it's super hard to attract and retain people because there is so many startups out there. There's too much noise. I think one of the tips I've been giving founders is, listen, you might say this role is important, but if you're not able to fill a role in 2 months, you should use an executive recruiter. You should use an external recruiter, executive or not, depends on the role. And so, in many cases, Natan, when I've referred a company to you, it's because they basically said, "Oh, this role is great. Send me some referrals, Gokul." I'm like, "Look, I can send you referrals. How long have you been recruiting for this role? 8 weeks? Either this role is not important if you're willing to let it keep open for 8 weeks, or you've got to find a specialist to close this role in the next 4 weeks. Because yeah, you can ask for investors for referrals, but many sometimes he's also so specialized that you want an engineer who's an infosec engineer. Now, people might not know, and then you want someone who's completely focused on filling this, or just acknowledge it's not essential and just close the role. I think it's very important for founders to uh, use exec recruiters and use specialists for things, anything. It's true for anything. If it's taking too long, or just say, I'm not going to do it. If something is taking 2 or 3 months to do in a startup, it's just not acceptable. So that's one on people. Don't just say, well, I'm not going to use an exec recruiter or not going to use a recruiter. You can decide, try to do it yourself, but many times that leverage and scale you get, and I've seen you operate now. I mean, my goodness, the founders have used you, and good recruiters like you. I mean, they've always been happy. So that's one. I think don't be too precious about not doing X or Y, but give yourself, put some guardrails in it. The second one is around uh, fundraising. There's a large bottleneck at the Series A right now. I think there was some data yesterday or 2 days ago that 10 years ago, the number of seats to Series A was close to 1 to 1, which seems crazy to me, but this data said 1 to 1. So there were number of series happening were equal to the number of seats. Now, the number of seats is 4 times the number of Series A. So, but the number of Series A investors hasn't gone up by much. Maybe it's gone up by 20%. The number of seed investors has gone up by 4x. And so basically that's basically the reason. And now if you have that kind of imbalance, what do you do? That means that the classic 1 million ARR thing that used to be the trope is no longer enough for you to raise a Series A. It is not. I've seen companies struggle to raise at 5 million ARR, a Series A, and being able to raise at 200K or even like less than that, 200 to 500K, or even sometimes even less. And I think what is important is it's not the numbers, it's the narrative and the storytelling. And a lot of the narrative and storytelling has to be around why you're different. Why are you different from everyone else out there who's doing something? So you got to figure out what is your niche and what is your differentiation, which makes you an N of one company. Because no Series A investor wants to invest in a company in a crowded space where there's six other companies that look and feel the same. So, for example, I'll give you an example. If you're building an AI SDR. I've recently met, about 6 or 7 companies that are doing different kinds of AI AE, AI SDR, AI account management, and they're all going to ultimately build all of this. Now, the problem is it's very hard to do a Series A for this kind of company, in my opinion, unless they are at massive scale and they are undisputably proven to be the leader. But to get there, you need a Series A. So, what should a company do? Well, guess what? They probably need to specialize. So, much easier is a Series A if you say, I'm an AI SDR for fintech companies, say, I don't know if there's something like that, or for security companies, and prove that that's a large market and prove that the needs of a security company are so different and specialized that you're going to go and win the security vertical and be known as the SDR that security companies use. And that itself is hopefully a multi-$100 million, if not $1 billion revenue business. And if you do that, that makes you much more differentiated. And ideally, it comes from a place where the founder has worked in that industry. They know what it takes to sell, and they have a few pilot customers that are using them in that space, and they've built a product that's geared for that space. So specialization is very important early on, and you earn the right over time to be general. But I think trying to be too broad too early is, I think, a very big challenge today because there's too many broad competitors out there who are doing too many broad things. So I think you got to be more specialized. Niche seems too small, but a niche doesn't need to be narrow. A niche is something that you go deep in and you do non-traditional things. There's a company in food called Slice, for example. I'm a huge fan of this company, Slice. The CEO has built such a great company, Ilir. I'm a huge fan of his, despite the existence of large food delivery platforms like Uber Eats and DoorDash. Ilir has Slice has built a great business. Why? By focusing on one vertical, pizzerias. And they've gone deep in pizzerias and built a full stack platform in ways that I don't think the big companies can easily replicate or follow. So they are known as a company that serves pizzerias. And that's, I think, versus someone who's a generic food delivery platform, it's just hard to compete with scale because of logistics costs and so on. So that's a good example of where you specialize and you build a really strong business focusing on a vertical or a niche. So that's a piece of advice.
Just some follow-up questions on that. Any reason or rhyme on why 2 months? Like, is that the proper amount of pain to get into the recruiting process? Because I'll speak for myself, but we're expensive. I think you get what you pay for. My grandfather always said that, but we struggle sometimes because a lot of companies don't want to spend that money.
I just kept 2 months because it's just giving the founders some leeway to say, okay, you want to do your own recruiting? Give some amount of time to do your own recruiting. I think it's probably closer to 4 weeks, where you do your own recruiting for 4 weeks. If it doesn't work out, Either admit that the role is not important, that's why you're willing to wait more than 4 weeks to fill the role, or get a specialist like SingleSprout, like you, to make it happen. So it's some time. I mean, it could be 2 months, 8 weeks, or 4 weeks, something like that. It can't be a few days, probably a few weeks. So it's probably 4 to 8 weeks, because a startup, like, I mean, anything over a quarter is just like, that's infinity. That's like too long. And I think two
Yeah,
months, but I think it's probably, you're right. It's probably close to 4 to 6 weeks, just to admit that, okay, you got to just look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm not being able to fill this role in 6 weeks. If I'm okay with that, that means that this role is not important to fill. I just don't have this role open. Or if I'm not
yeah,
okay with that, obviously what I've tried has not worked for 6 whole weeks, which is an eternity. Get a specialist.
makes sense. I love hearing that. I wish that sometimes I had like a time travel device to say, let's go through time, feel that pain, and then get back to me. But sometimes they just need to wait and they feel it. And we get a lot of clients that after speaking to them, they come back to us and say, okay, now we're ready, right?
Exactly.
Um, on the storytelling piece, it's interesting. When I interviewed Alex Moore from first employee from Palantir and board member from he's on Palantir, he's at 8BC. He was saying a lot about vision and how thinking about vision for not a few years, but like 10 to 20 years, like hard work, philosophical, psychological. What's your view on like storytelling for vision?
I think you have to have that big picture vision, but you've got to earn the right to. I think a lot of founders sometimes come across as visionary, but they don't have the right sequence of steps to work their way towards a vision. I completely agree. I think you need both. You need this right sequence to get to that vision. You again earn the right to build your way into the vision. Tony at DoorDash always said, "I want to transform local commerce." But guess what? He didn't start doing all of that from day one. For many years, you've got to fight the fight of doing restaurant delivery, food delivery. Then you go into convenience for a couple of years. Then you go to the grocery for a few years. Then you do retail maybe over time. All of those things. And so you've got to have the right sequence and you've got to choose, right? Bezos the same way. When you did books, why'd you do books? Because the SKUs are very clear. There's basically much cheaper to transport. There's a bunch of reasons, warehouse, etc., right? Versus starting with say electronics or something like that. You start with a certain specialization and then you broaden. Um,
Yeah,
you've got to be specialist, because if you try to boil the ocean, it's just not going to work at the early stage.
I love that line, boil the ocean. And I think, when I think about recruiting and hiring, you want to have that big vision. I think that's what attracts so many candidates to come and work at your company, but it has to be realistic and it has to fit into their timeline as well. And of course, you can't build a company for a specific person, but when I was listening to your story, Gokul, I was thinking about, you know, working at Google, working at Facebook, working at Square, a lot had to do with small businesses, helping people at that level. How much does that play into the recruiting conversation from what you've seen?
I think nowadays candidates are pretty smart and informed, well informed, right? I think they come into a meeting already understanding the company. 20 years ago, it was hard to find much about companies. Now, every company you search, there's social media, there's articles on the founders, LinkedIn, you can research everything. And so you've got to tell them something that surprises and amazes them, because they're here. Good candidates have lots of good opportunities. So to really stand out, absolutely right. I think you've got to, beyond the numbers, you've got to have a narrative. I always say any story, and I think it has to be the same so you tell your investors. The reality is, employees, including candidates, investors, and customers are the three stakeholders of a company, right? And so the founder has to tell a consistent story to all of them, which includes numbers. It also includes narrative. Even your customers want to hear a vision. Why? Because they don't want to just buy as you as a point solution. They want to basically know what you're going to intend to build, but they also want to see something tangible today. And then you've got to make sure that they don't end up buying some competitors' products that surround you. But you can say, look, I might only do, payroll today, but I'm going to do some HR system later. I'm going to do this other thing. They're all going to fit together seamlessly. That's why, invest in me and I'll build and transform this whole, kludgy set of things you have into something beautiful and simple, like probably Rippling did when they started or something like that. But you've got to tell a vision to all these three constituents, or have a narrative which is compelling and far reaching and decades. Like,
Yeah,
I think the 2 decades is a good 10 to 20 years is what it takes to build an enduring company.
I mean, one mistake that I see companies make is not treating candidates like potential investors, right? They're especially early stage, right? You're going to give them hopefully a good amount of equity. You got to sell them. One thing that I would love more companies to do is, and we do this at SingleSprout, build like a small deck. It doesn't need to be an investor deck, but at least one page with wins and reasons and culture and the
Yes.
background and stuff to give to candidates outside of job description. Like job description is like, okay, do I fit the role? Do I have the tech stack? Maybe I understand the problem space. But if you're looking for people to really significantly invest the time, they need to be able to go back and tell their partner or their friends or their colleagues why this is an amazing opportunity for them.
I think that's a great point. It might be good if I think that's such a good idea that hopefully you can give a template like this to a founder and even maybe, get them and maybe say, look, let's just get on the phone for an hour. Let's together fill this out, so that way they have our block set up and you just kind of show some examples to them. Obviously, it's public for some of these companies because they're sending it to candidates. Here's a couple of examples. It take 30 minutes to an hour to fill out what it is.
Yeah. You can tell a lot, I think, about the company that's able to give us this information versus like, let's just get the candidates. Just send me the candidates. It's like this is a two-way street, right? You need to be able to sell them as much as they need to be able to sell you, especially the best candidates are not just standing there waiting for a job, right?
Exactly. But your employees are investors, like you said. They have
Yeah.
invested themselves into the company. They're basically investing their time and themselves and their family's future in many cases into your company.
Yeah. One of the things that I see, I mean, I'll move on in a second, but one of the things that I see right now, especially in the market, is companies are really narrowing in on the reasons why candidates want to join, like the reason of like, oh, I'm super excited about the problem space versus like, oh, I'm looking for an early stage company to join. And I can appreciate that, right? You want to invest in someone that's really excited and really interested. And so I hope it's also like a two-way street for the candidate as well to know like you better have a damn good reason of why you want to join the company. It's different than a few years ago.
Exactly. Exactly right.
So Gokul, we'll move on. What other capabilities should teams be building right now that you're not seeing them build, and why?
Yeah, I think one of the things is around an all hands. I think you can't wait for too long. I think it's a good muscle to start doing an all hands once a week. It doesn't need to be heavyweight. It can be lightweight, where just people come up and just talk about what they've built. And for remote teams, it can be over Zoom. But I think doing 30 minutes every Friday or something like that, Thursday or Friday, depending on where people are, it's a great way to get everyone together, to share, to not create silos. Everyone knows everyone's working on, even when there's 5 or 6 people. I think it's good to start something like that. I think people wait till too long and then it seems too heavyweight. People are not used to it, complain, etc. So I think early on in the journey, starting all hands is a good muscle to build. To share, the founder always, you have the founder says a few words. What's important to them. What's coming up, what happened. What's critical, and then different teams or different people, even like if there's only 6 people, everyone just comes and talks about what they've been working on, and people ask questions, AMA at the end. And maybe if it's virtual, you share, have some drinks, some food. Like if it's in real time, or if it's virtual, you can actually have a virtual, people are eating and drinking and etc. So I think all hands is a great muscle to build. The second one is, I think, there's more of a founder thing. Having a mentor uh, who's selling to the same kind of customer, or who has the same kind of customer, or the same but not a direct competitor at a company that's 1 to 2 stages ahead of you, um, because I think they've gone through the same journey. So if you're a seed company, find someone who's just raised their Series B, for example, or raised their Series A year ago. So they're about 18 months because they've gone through the Series A journey, and ideally selling to the same kinds of customers. So you might be selling maybe to enterprises. They also sell to enterprises, but they don't sell to the HR team. They sell to the finance team. But they kind of have similar experiences. Okay, how do you hire an AE? What do you look for? Or how do you hire this or that? How do you set up things? Because I do think there are fundamental differences between B2C and B2B companies, and between SMB B2B and enterprise B2B companies in some ways. So, and between infrastructure and app companies. So find someone who's close enough to what you're doing, but not a competitor, and just get them as a mentor, even as a formal advisor if you need to. I think you'll find, if you can find 1 or 2 folks like that, you have so many questions that come up around how to do this, that, and the other. Having 2 people who are CEOs of companies ahead of you as mentors or buddies in some ways is massive.
I like that a lot. We have an advisor at SingleSprout who's been doing recruiting for 40 years. He was a partner at Korn Ferry. He was a partner at Hydrix, and I feel like he's right 90% of the time. Like he's just seen it all. He's been through ups and downs. I see the advantage there. He really cares also, and I think the right person in that situation. Obviously, you want to pay people for their time, but I feel like the right person will actually like want to dedicate their time. They'll see it as something that like maybe it's giving back or it's like an opportunity for them. It'll be a mutual as opposed to like, Gokul, I really want to pay you, 500, 1,000, and 5,000 now or whatever it is.
Exactly right, because they themselves feel more. I mean, it's some way to give back, but it also teaches them something. What's going on at that stage, and they learn something. I think that's why I always did angel investing, not because of the making money or something like that, because I learned something every time I talked to an early stage entrepreneur while working at larger companies.
Yeah. Gokul, I guess on that point, I want to ask, I'm just curious, like what drives you? I mean, you've had a lot of success by, society standards. Why keep doing this?
I think what drives me is the opportunity to have impact, to continue to have impact. I want to make sure that I just love basically helping someone who then goes on to do well. I've seen now, a few companies I've been involved with very early, where the founders have done really well, the companies have done really well, and you just feel pride. And I get energy from that. Basically, seeing someone that you helped in some small way, going on to hopefully, you know, do well, and then they themselves hopefully then get into that position. So that's basically what it is, having impact. Ultimately everyone needs something. It's, I feel, my way of giving back to the broader ecosystem, because I've been helped by dozens of people in my journey. And so on one side it's a way to give back, but the other side it's something that gives me energy, helping a company and then seeing the founder and the company do something amazing and saying, oh, you know what, I had a small role to play in that. Gives me energy and keeps me going.
That brings a smile to my heart. I really appreciate that. And I also heard like helping people, especially people that like, I think I want to see more of that in the world. I guess, that brings me to one of the last questions here, which is what's your prediction in the next 12 to 24 months of something that hasn't yet happened that you think is going to happen? And how do founders prepare for that?
I think one of the predictions I have, which I think is going to come true, is that AI is going to actually start taking over. I think it's already happening, actually. I think AI has, if you look at job postings on Upwork and Fiverr, the number of postings in for low value tasks has gone down, because people are just using AI directly, Chat GPT or Claude or something like that, to get those done. So I think we're going to start seeing now AI probably in the next 12 to 18 months move into mid value tasks. I think high value tasks are probably safe for a few years, but I think you're going to see an acceleration, and I think everyone has to upskill and up level to basically not do low value tasks, and low value tasks will be done by software. And we are seeing that if you want to do a logo, for example, you might earlier have used Upwork or something for $50 $100 to create a brand logo for yourself, but now you can get a brand logo using AI tools for creating logos for like $2, or and get, more importantly, get it very fast. So if that's the case, then all the logo things might go away from Upwork. Again, there might be some specialized logo for the Olympics or something, or for something like that that you use designers. But I think you're going to see software. I think again it's a very, and I think you're going to see it across functions, but also across industries. Increasingly, I'm sure you've worked with many companies who are going after industries like law or healthcare, when you're going to start seeing increasing number of lower, I would say lower skill roles in some ways, not less important, but maybe the skill level needed is less, being slowly taken away by AI. And then those people who had the lower skill will be up leveled and upskilled. And that's what you're going to see. So the way companies can prepare for it is essentially, on one side, I think you hear about a single entrepreneur creating $1 billion company. I think entrepreneurs should think about what tasks they need to hire. You can actually run the company with a leaner team now, than you could 12 months ago. And I think it's going to keep getting, you can run a company with a small number of seasoned and senior people, uh, basically, and then use a network of AI and humans around you to help you with most of the other things.
I guess just to kind of narrow in on that, Gokul, like the mid-level tasks of the future, what is that? What does that mean to you?
I think it's basically doing uh, multiple things chained together in some ways. So, for example, for an SDR, I think it could be, well, you're basically downloading a lead list and then emailing the lead. So those two things chained together is a mid-level task. But maybe even a better mid-level task is then when someone replies, being able to reply to them and set up an appointment, and that probably is a mid-level task where maybe the AI can download a list and start creating personalized emails, but you might not trust it to then, based on what the person replies back, you want someone, maybe a human, to reply and maybe get on a call and set up an appointment for the AE to step in. So that may be a mid-level task that over the next 2 3 years, I think that might also be automated in many cases.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Almost done here. Gokul, anything else you want to add before we close out?
I think I think the this is one of the eras of technology, or maybe of humankind, that is probably the most similar to the rise of the internet 30 years ago, right? 1994 was when the internet was really, internet has been around for like 50 years, but the browser, I would say, not the internet, but the browser is the first time we experienced internet. That was 30 years old. I think it's akin to the rise of the browser, this new age of AI. And so I think there is going to be societal and other changes that we can't even predict as a result of this, not just on technology, but companies in technology are living in the white hot center of it. And I personally can't wait to hopefully participate in it in some way, help companies, and see how it changes, hopefully, all of us, for the ideally amplify the good things about it and minimize the invariably there's always negative things, but minimize it. I am a technology optimist, and I'm excited for what this does for our society, our race of humans are, and broadly speaking, for the world.
I hope so. I hope good things. You certainly inspire me and many others. I really appreciate your time, your energy, your inspiration, and all you do, not just for me, but for the community